Hello friends, welcome to FDR India. Let's talk Dr. Jayaprakash Narayan today and understand a few things. Hello sir.
Hello.
Sir, if surveys are to be believed right now, it appears that the BJP government will be back in power after the coming elections. The surveys indicate that they'll get an even higher majority than last year. And in a similar context, the current Prime Minister, Mr. Narendra Modi, over the last couple of months has been saying that in his third term as the Prime Minister, India will become the third largest economy. To put things into perspective, in 2014, when he became the Prime Minister, India was the 10th largest economy. So after these two terms have passed and hoping that the Prime Minister will get a third term, what do you think should be the agenda of the country so that the dream is realized?
First of all, Ankit, nobody can predict election outcomes.
Right,
And surveys often tend to go wrong.
right.
So it doesn't really matter who comes to office, whether Mr. Modi gets a third term and his combined his alliance and his party, or the other parties form a coalition that can get the third term. But there are countries' interests, unfinished agenda remains there. If you view it from Mr. Modi's perspective, perhaps the first term was largely spent on enhancing his electoral viability by improving delivery of the welfare measures, etc., in the northern part of the country, the Hindi belt, etc. Because even the kind of delivery that was available in the southern part of the country, southern states for about 30, 40 years, that was not available in the northern part. Now, people habitually talked about bad selection of beneficiaries, massive corruption, leakages, and therefore delivery was not good. Whereas, whether it's MGR's midday meal program, NTR's 2 rupees rice, and subsequently a whole host of welfare programs in southern India, whether they're wise programs or unwise programs, they were implemented very competently by and large. The benefits reached the intended beneficiaries. I think in the northern India, for the first time, that happened.
Yes.
And therefore, he probably strengthened his electoral base. And that is, I think, the main reason why he won such a resounding victory last time. And many people actually were surprised with that. The second term, a lot of it is spent on COVID management. While we had serious deficiencies in healthcare sector and in our infrastructure, for instance, oxygen deficiency, the cylinders deficiency, and so on and so forth. On the whole, the perception is that the government managed this competently under the circumstances. While there were some missteps initially, whether it's the vaccination program, the massive program vaccinating practically every adult in the country, or improving the logistics after the initial missteps and the failings, I think it was a fairly competent exercise. And ultimately, while we had a large number of deaths that probably could have been avoided if only we had oxygen and other infrastructure, particularly during the height of Delta wave, if you take the totality of the picture, the per unit population, either the morbidity or the mortality, it was roughly comparable with much of the rest of the world, perhaps even lower. And I think people appreciated that. But that apart, there was a concerted attempt to improve the quality of the economy, the nature of the economy. Infrastructure, the first time itself efforts were made, but they were accelerated, infrastructure investment, etc. And despite COVID, competent fiscal management, then a series of reforms, whether it's the bankruptcy code or improvement of the bank's performance. They were really languishing earlier, and this government came to office, the non-performing assets were very, very high, and many banks were in serious losses. All that was reversed, and banks are in very healthy shape right now. And a series of other measures for labor reforms and so on and so forth, they were initiated. One measure that should have succeeded were the farm laws.
Right.
I have held then, I hold now, that these farm laws, while they are not a panacea, all these three laws are very sound laws, enhancing the market competition and opportunities to the farmer, giving greater options, and therefore enhancing potentially the income. Many more things need to be done, but these three laws are absolute and unexceptionable. But given the sad nature of our political discourse and inability of the government to bring about a consensus even on issues which are good for the country, ultimately the farm laws had to be withdrawn. That was a setback. But perhaps not a very big setback, because ultimately sanity will prevail, rationality will prevail. So given that, in a broad sense, economic management, while there are a few more things perhaps to be done, for instance, We have to work a lot to promote employment generating industry, labor intensive industries, even if the wages are not very high, for the large low skilled population. Because we have something like 88% or some people, over 80%, maybe 82% of the workers are in the unorganized sector without any wage security. That's the largest number for a large economy anywhere in the world. It's a humongous number. It's a global challenge. Therefore, employing these people with low skills and creating conditions so that not all of them will have to migrate to distant big cities is, I think, the fundamental economic, political, and social challenge. You can actually see the increasing schism in India between the cities and the rural India. Take Telangana. The perception was the earlier government in Telangana gave a reasonable economic growth, particularly to Hyderabad city, and people of Hyderabad felt the impact of the growth. While there was growth in Telangana, significant growth in Telangana overall, the impact of it was not felt adequately by the rural people. And therefore, in the city, the erstwhile governing party won, or their allies, they won almost every seat, and one seat won was by BJP. Congress, the present governing party in the state, did not win a single seat,
Right.
while they won the whole state. And in the rest of the state, vast majority of seats were won by Congress.
Right.
Essentially, it's an economic vote. And you can see the schism. And if low-skilled people are forced to migrate to distant big cities to eke out a precarious livelihood, they have terrible time. We have seen in the case of COVID lockdowns how the unorganized poor from the villages who migrated to urban areas in search of employment, they suffered when they had to go back. It should never happen again. It must be seared in our memory. It's a challenge to our conscience as a country. Unless they get very dignified employment close to their home place in a small town which is getting modernized and urbanized, unless the governments build infrastructure there and promote employment generation, promote labor intensive industry in a big way, we'll be in serious trouble. Therefore, I think the single biggest thing that the next government should be doing is promote labor intensive industry. The PLI kind of program must be extended. You continue that program in whatever sectors that are existing right now, but extend it very aggressively to labor intensive industries so that a large number of small industries, in garments, leather, electronics, electronic goods, and many other labor intensive industries with low skills. That I think is the most important thing, economically speaking. And it has obviously political and social implications. But that apart, the fundamental challenges of India are unaddressed largely in the country, whichever be the party in power. What are they? Rule of law. Now, whenever we hear about police or CBI or enforcement directorate and abuse of the powers or selective prosecution, etc., by way of criticism, you only hear from the political leaders an attack on the ruling parties of the respective states. For instance, the state police, 98% of crime investigation is in states, state police. And they never say what are the steps they propose in order to insulate crime investigation and prosecution from politics, and in order to ensure effective and real rule of law where everybody is equal before law. So it's more like, all right, you're abusing power, let me come to power, I'll abuse. That's no good. If you're serious about our democracy, the parties in power or in opposition, particularly those in office, they must be aggressive about genuine rule of law. That means police, prosecution, forensics, procedures, and judiciary, particularly the trial court level. Unless all these are radically transformed to benefit the country and to ensure rule of law, as time progresses, we'll be in greater and greater danger, because as the economy progresses, urbanization takes place, the social controls that are holding us on the straight and narrow path will increasingly be weak. And therefore, you'll have lawlessness, you'll have crime, you'll have disputes unresolved, therefore you have, again, criminality, rough and ready justice through brutal methods. This is not good for the country. You will have ghettoization. And therefore, to my mind, rule of law. Then the next issue is decentralization of power and decentralization of the economy. Unless you really empower the third tier of governments, and India has the most centralized government probably on planet Earth, except a few incredibly small, terribly dictatorial countries. Even countries like China, China is far more democratic in terms of the third tier being empowered than India. The counties and towns and cities are very well empowered in China. We cannot even dream of that kind of empowerment. And without the third tier empowerment in the country, neither will economic growth be balanced. I already mentioned to you the need for decentralized economic development, small town development, and so on and so forth is necessary. It will also continue the political crisis of India. Because if exercise of power is disconnected from the people, far removed from the people, then the link between the vote and what happens to your life as a citizen and as a collective, that is missing in the people's mind. And therefore, in a poor country, vote becomes a purchasable commodity. The citizens or the voters, they indulge in short-term maximization of their gains, and the political parties and candidates, they indulge in vote buying. That is the heart of the political crisis of India. And if that's not enough, you focus on the short-term individual welfare at the cost of long-term collective good. Because you are despaired of long-term collective good. So if it rains, it floods, and we blame it on global warming or God, it's absurd. We have to have proper stormwater drainage. There has to be proper sewerage. There has to be proper drinking water. There has to be quality education. We are spending a lot of money in education, but 80% of Indians have no hope of future because they get no education worth mentioning. And our healthcare is in shambles. We are spending very little. We need to spend a little more, but a little more wisely. And as a result of poor healthcare delivery, about 5 crore people in India are falling into poverty every year. About 55 to 58% of the expenditure in healthcare is out of pocket. It's causing devastation in the country. So rule of law, basic amenities and infrastructure, quality education, healthcare, and finally, political reform. How long can we continue with this plutocracy and kleptocracy? It doesn't matter which party wins. It's the same pool of candidates. They migrate from party to party depending on the way the wind is blowing before the election and depending on the local context. If my potential rival is already in another party, then I choose the other party. There's no ideology for most of the people. We're all pretending. And money. The first question asked of a candidate in many states or a potential candidate is how much can you spend? Not what is the experience you bring to the table, what is your record of service, what are your credentials. No. How much do you spend? And the next question is, who is your father? So this is not the way you should run a democracy. Obviously, it's wrong. Our electoral system needs to be addressed. And our political parties. You cannot run a democracy, a sound democracy, through autocratic political parties. Political parties have become dynastic. An individual or a family is ruling the roost. In membership, in choice of leadership, in choice of candidates for elective office, in fund management, all these must be transparent, democratic. Germany has a federal law about running a political party. You all have to adhere to that. We don't have to be intrusive about political party management, but they have to be democratic. We are not telling them what they should do on a day-to-day basis or their policies. We're telling them how they should do it. That how is important. A political party is not a private organization. It is not a typical society. The moment a political party is seeking power, it's seeking the vote, control over the money, control over legislation. That is the purpose of a political party, right?
Right.
If you don't seek these things, you are any non-profit organization. Even non-profit organizations want them to conform to certain norms, right? Whereas political party is seeking much more. It is seeking your tax money, power over that. It is seeking power over you through legislation, budgeting, priorities, laws. And it is getting tax exemption. In 2003, I was very much instrumental in persuading the government and the opposition at the time to give 100% tax exemption to the donors of political parties. So we are getting political funding, indirect funding from the government. And should you not be democratic? Will you be a private estate? A political fiefdom? An individual monarchy? It's wrong. I was in Kenya monitoring the presidential election, the parliamentary election, local elections all at one go, way back in 2002, after 27 years of dictatorship. Mr. Daniel Moy was the dictator until that time for 27 years, representing the ruling party, African National Congress. Because of public pressure in the country, he was forced to conduct elections. He was still president dictator at that time when I was there. On behalf of the Commonwealth, I was an observer in that. The president's son, the president's own son, whose father was a 27-year dictator, party president, and still head in the country, he wanted to be a parliamentary candidate on behalf of the father's party. He could not become a candidate because Kenya institutionalized primary elections. The party members had to decide who will be their candidate. Though the president himself wanted the son to be the candidate, the members said no because of the mood at that time. There was anger against the establishment. And I marveled at it. We claim quite rightly remarkable accomplishments in our democracy. But a dictatorship until that time, 27 years, with very little experience of democracy, in some respects they proved to be a better democracy than India. We have to be more humble about our democracy. We should be very proud of our accomplishments, but we should also be humble about our failings and look at what's happening in the rest of the world and find the best methods to suit Indian conditions to make our democracy work. So unless making our democracy work is a priority, political parties, electoral system, then rule of law, the whole gamut of issues related to rule of law, decentralization of power, and decentralization of economic management, labor-intensive industry. Unless they're taken up on a war footing, we'll be in trouble as a country. Becoming the fifth largest to third largest economy is given. We are doing reasonably well. We could do better. We should aim at 8-9% growth rate with the demographic dividend that we hope to get in the next 25 years or so. But even 7-8% is not a bad rate. And therefore, we will definitely overtake both Germany and Japan. Because after all, we are now at roughly $3.8 trillion GDP. Germany and Japan are between $4 and $5 trillion, a little over $5 trillion. In the next 3 years, we'll easily reach about $5.5 trillion or so, next 3-4 years, before 2030 at any rate. And therefore, we'll certainly become the third largest economy. That's not an issue at all, but that's not enough. We have to make a serious dent in poverty. We have to improve the quality of life. We have to improve the quality of our democracy, and we have to have rule of law, along with economic progress and incomes and prosperity. And it's possible. There is an incredible opportunity. India is well placed because of the demographic dividend and some good things done over the years by successive governments, and because of the fear of China and the rest of the world wants us to succeed.
Right.
Let's grab this opportunity. But let's also improve our democracy and prove that a very large, diverse country with ancient history and culture can make democracy work and become prosperous and be harmonious. All these three are possible: democracy, harmony, and prosperity. And we must aim at nothing less. But we must do the right things in the right way.
So you said the Election Commission of India has a strong system and the system is working. You've mentioned these cases also in the past. What is the situation now?
Ankit, you just look at the election verdicts in the last 5-10 years. You take, for instance, the elections in Rajasthan, Madhya Pradesh, and Chhattisgarh in the last cycle, 5 years ago.
Yes.
Despite Mr. Modi being Prime Minister and BJP and DA coalition being in power, in all these states, Congress did very well. Actually, in 2 states, they formed a government. 1 state, they were neck and neck, and for some time they were in government, and later, because of some people crossing over, the BJP came to power. You take the recent elections, or you take, for instance, the Delhi election. The Prime Minister himself campaigned. I think it was unwise, because in a union territory or a municipality, why should the Prime Minister campaign? But anyway, he campaigned, but they lost. You take Punjab. The governing party did not even come number 2, the BJP. They lost. You take Himachal Pradesh. Again, the Congress party won. And BJP and the Prime Minister campaigned very hard. And take the 2 southern states, Karnataka. The BJP lost hands down. Telangana, the Congress won. So what does it show? There is absolutely no room to believe or no no concern for skepticism about our election conduct. There is much that is wrong behind the election scene. I keep repeating ad nauseum. The criminalization of politics, the money, power in politics, the vote buying which everybody is indulging in. But these are systemic issues at this point of time. But the actual conduct of polls, which is what the Election Commission's job is, and the whole gamut of the machinery, the administrative machine of India, whose job it is, it has been exemplary in the country. Look at the way in these 5 states elections were conducted, how peaceful they were, how orderly the whole process was. Is there one seat where anybody contested the outcome? One candidate? Is there one state where anybody doubted the outcome? After it happened, did anybody challenge that? We gracefully accepted the electoral verdict. And in Telangana, Congress won. In the 3 large North Indian states, the BJP won. So what does it show? Are we saying that the Election Commission selectively is acting in one way in one state, another way in one state? It's absurd. Let us not sow seeds of discord. Let us not extract defeat from the jaws of victory. Our election conduct is remarkable in the country on the whole. But our political culture and electoral system and centralization of power and poor delivery of services and poverty together with universal franchise are an explosive combination. That is not the Election Commission's mandate.
Right.
Election Commission is not here to transform the nature of politics of India.
Okay.
Just as Supreme Court of India is not here to transform India's governance. It is a political function. We are confusing the roles. The political system must come to grips with this and decide what is the best way to improve the nature of elections, electoral system, or political parties. But Election Commission and the election machinery is doing an exemplary job on the whole. And if there are any minor problems here and there, we'll set it right. But let us not throw the baby with the bathwater.
So the larger political reform and the larger political...
That is required. And you certainly have a multi-member body.
Right.
But a multi-member body involving the Chief Justice is not always the best thing. Why should you bring in judiciary into all executive functions? Already judiciary is transgressing the executive functions. That's not a very wise thing for the country or for the judiciary.
Right.
Or for the judiciary. Because judicial integrity, judicial credibility are critical for the country. When push comes to shove, when the political parties, because of polarization, are not able to resolve the great dilemmas of the country, we depend on the judiciary. If we start suspecting judiciary, if their role increasingly is seen to be politicized, then who is there to safeguard the country's interests on fundamental issues of polarization?
Right. Thank you.
True power lies in restraint. Judiciary also must learn to be restrained, not intervene everywhere. Reserve, keep your powder dry. Use it when real constitutional liberty is at stake, constitutional order is at stake.
So just to conclude, 6 things that is on Dr. JP's priority is labor-intensive industries, promotion and expansion of the PLI schemes like PLI, rule of law, genuine decentralization, quality education and healthcare, political reforms and electoral reforms. Thank you, sir, for putting our perspective right.
Thank you.